I woke up in a cold white ICU room, chest aching, IV still in my arm. They said my heart had stopped twice. They said I was lucky to be alive. But the thing that truly broke me was the first thing I saw when I opened my phone. There was only one message from Monica. No concern, no fear, no love. Just a screenshot of our bank account. Balance zero, and a single sentence. She said she deserved the money after everything she had done for me. $61,000. Everything I had saved after more than 2 decades behind the wheel of a long-haul truck, retirement fund, maintenance budget, emergency cushion. All gone while I was unconscious, hanging somewhere between life and death. Not even sure if I'd wake up again. I didn't reply with words. Just a single emoji. The thumbs up. The next morning, I didn't go home. I met Monica at a gas station just outside Spokane. She was struggling with a flat tire, and I was just the only guy who stopped to help. She smiled, a little shy, but her eyes were bright like spring sunlight. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just doing what anyone would have done. But to her, the fact that I knew how to use a jack made me look like some kind of hero. We got married 6 months later. Fast, but not reckless. I was 32. She was 29. We'd both had relationships that went nowhere. This one felt different. It felt solid. At first, life was simple. She worked a desk job. I was on the road 3 weeks at a time, home for 1. We didn't have kids. Not because we didn't want to, but because time kept slipping past us, and we never really sat down to talk seriously about it. In the early years, Monica lit up every time I came home. She'd clean up the house, cook something nice, tell me everything about her week. When I was away, she texted every night asking where I was, if I'd eaten, if I was sleeping. Okay, I still remember the first time I came home a day early, and she hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. In that moment, I thought, this is the woman I'll grow old with. We had our little rhythms, Sunday breakfasts, late-night movies on the couch, sometimes just sitting in silence listening to the rain hit the porch. Nothing glamorous. But back then, I believed it was enough. Looking back now, maybe it was only enough for me, not for her anymore. I couldn't point to the exact moment things started slipping. There was no big fight, no slammed doors, no tears, just a slow, quiet drift, like a warm room that had somehow turned cold even though the windows were still closed. Monica started coming home later. Said she had long meetings or dinner with old friends I'd never heard of. When I asked casually, she said they were just college friends. At first, I believed her. I wanted to believe my wife. She stopped asking about my routes. Used to be every time I rolled into a new state, Monica wanted to know where I was if it was snowing, yet if that old diner we liked was still open. Now the messages were short. Sometimes there were none at all. Her phone was always with her, face down on the table. New password. When I asked, she said it was an update for security. Sounded reasonable. Still, something didn't feel right. I remember coming home early once unannounced. Monica wasn't there. Her car was in the garage, her purse on the counter. But the house felt empty, like whoever had been living there had already left, just hadn't taken their things yet. A few weeks later, she brought up shifting money between accounts. Said the interest at one bank was better than another. Monica had never been one to care about financial details. Now she was offering to track transfers, asking for my login so she could help. I didn't question it. I gave it to her. We were married. Or at least I thought we were. The signs didn't come like a storm. They came like a slow drizzle, light, persistent, easy to dismiss. Until one day you look around and realize you've been soaked for a while and didn't even notice. They rushed me into the ER in Idaho after the chest pain finally forced me to pull over. They said I passed out behind the wheel, that my heart stopped for 12 seconds before they brought me back. I don't remember any of it. Just the overhead lights, and then nothing but cold black. 2 days later, I woke up in a hospital bed in Spokane, tubes in my arm, a steady ache in my chest. The nurse said I'd survived. I was lucky. But all I felt was empty. The first thing I did was check my phone. No missed calls, no voicemails, just one message from Monica. A screenshot of our joint bank account, balance zero. And a sentence saying she deserved the money after everything she'd sacrificed for me. There was no question about whether I was alive. I didn't feel anger. Just a hollow kind of exhaustion no sleep could fix. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji, then turned off the phone. The doctor told me to avoid stress. No driving for 6 weeks. He asked if someone would be picking me up. I lied and said yes. That night I called Brandon, my younger brother. We weren't close, but he didn't ask questions. I said I needed a place to crash, asked him not to tell Monica I was alive. I didn't go home the next day. I went to Brandon's. His guest room was small, but it was quiet. Quiet enough to think. Monica never checked in. No message. No call. She knew I was alive. The hospital would have contacted her. But she never asked where I was. Never asked when I'd come home. Somehow, that silence hurt more than the theft. 3 days later, I got a text from Ron, my old neighbor. He said he hadn't seen me around and wanted to make sure I was okay. Said there was some guy hanging around my house. I didn't respond. Just stared at the message like it might finish the story for me. That afternoon, Brandon drove me to the main branch of the regional bank. Not the one Monica and I usually went to. I asked to speak with a fraud specialist. I showed her my hospital records, the withdrawal dates. Explained I'd been unconscious at the time. She kept a professional face, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Sympathy, maybe. She told me joint accounts are tricky, but I could file a formal fraud report. I agreed. I had nothing left to lose. I needed someone to go through all the legal documents from the mortgage refinance to the asset ownership papers. Brandon suggested I talk to Sophie, his niece, who was interning at a local credit union while finishing her final year in law school. Sophie didn't ask many questions. I told her I was being betrayed and needed to know what was really going on beneath the surface. She nodded, took the folder I handed her, and disappeared into Brandon's study. By evening, she came back, and her expression said everything. Sophie found a separate bank account under Monica's name opened 18 months ago. The deposits were always just under $10,000, right below the federal reporting threshold. Not illegal, but calculated just enough to avoid raising flags. What hit harder was that Monica wasn't the only one with access. Listed as an authorized user was a name I hadn't expected to see: Ron Whitaker, my neighbor. The same man who had messaged me with concern, warning me there was someone at my house while I was away. I stared at his name on the screen, half expecting it to disappear if I looked long enough. But the truth was clear. Monica hadn't done this alone, and maybe she never felt guilty to begin with. I'm not someone who looks to place blame, but if I'm being honest, I can understand how Monica got to where she did. Not to excuse it, but to see clearly how a marriage can erode without anyone noticing. We never really fought, but we also stopped talking. I was gone 3 weeks out of every month, always on the road. My messages became routine, made it all good. Weather's rough, sleep well. I thought that was enough. I was providing, working, staying loyal. But Monica didn't want more money. She wanted presence. She wanted to feel seen. We never had kids. No busy dinners, no bedtime stories or weekend soccer games. We lived under the same roof, but it felt more like we were sharing a lease. When I came home, she cooked, cleaned, asked polite questions. But the warmth was gone. The waiting was gone. Then there was the refinancing. Interest rates were low. I wanted to lock in a better deal. Monica said she was busy, told me to go ahead. So I did. I signed the documents alone. I didn't think twice. My credit was stronger. I assumed she wouldn't mind. But she did mind. Maybe she saw it as a final signal, that her opinion didn't matter anymore. That I no longer saw her as part of the plan, not a partner, just background. I've replayed that moment more times than I care to admit. I don't know if it was the breaking point, but after that, the silence between us felt heavier. She stopped asking where I was, stopped reacting when I came home late or stayed overnight in the truck. Her silence wasn't peace. It was surrender. Maybe Monica didn't set out to betray me. Maybe she just felt invisible. And when Ron showed up with attention, with small kindnesses, she felt chosen again. Seen, prioritized, and maybe in her twisted logic, my signing those papers alone was the first betrayal. Maybe taking the money felt like self-defense. But that kind of defense turned into something darker, something calculated. When someone sees themselves as a victim long enough, they'll justify anything, even cheating, even stealing, even walking away from a man who was fighting for his life. I've never been the loud type, never imagined I'd be the guy taking his wife to court. But when the hurt crosses a certain line, You stop asking why and start planning. I met with Graham, the attorney Brandon recommended. The kind of man who didn't talk much, but when he did, you knew it mattered. We sat at Brandon's kitchen table with the paperwork laid out between us: bank records, hospital admission forms, house title, and a small notebook where I'd written down every strange thing Monica had done in the last year. Graham read through it all, making small marks with a pencil. Then he looked up and said I had the advantage. The house was in my name. The money was withdrawn while I was medically incapacitated, a potential case of financial exploitation. He pointed to one clause in the mortgage refinance, a medical protection clause I had completely forgotten about. Now it was my ace. He told me not to reply to any messages from Monica. From that moment on, everything would go through him. A few days later, Monica showed up at Brandon's house. I was alone. She rang the bell, knocked, then called out that we needed to talk. I didn't move, didn't peek through the blinds. I just sat still on the couch like a kid playing hide and seek. Eventually, she left. My phone buzzed soon after. A long, scattered message. She said she panicked, said she thought I was planning to leave her. Accused me of hiding the refinance. Said she took the money to protect herself. No apology, just explanations from someone who was starting to lose control. I didn't answer. I forwarded the message to Graham. The next week, I got word that Monica had hired a lawyer. Not just anyone, Angela Price, one of the most aggressive divorce attorneys in the state. Graham smirked when I told him. He said people like her play hard and they'll paint me as unstable, heartless, cruel. A few days later, I drove past our old house. A black Audi I didn't recognize was in the driveway. I didn't stop, just took a photo. Sent it to Graham. Part of the strategy. Observe. Document. Stay quiet. That evening, I got a message from an unknown number. It was from Angela Price. She said she represented Monica and that any further surveillance of the property would be considered harassment. They were watching me. I was watching them. And from that moment on, this wasn't about marriage anymore. It was war. 2 weeks later, we appeared in court for the first time, an emergency hearing Graham had filed early on. The judge was an older man with silver hair, glasses low on his nose, and eyes that didn't miss much. Monica showed up in a sharp, well-tailored suit, standing beside her attorney with a face carved from stone, though I noticed her hands clenched tightly as the hearing began. I wore an old white shirt and the one tie I kept in my truck, the kind you pull out for unexpected roadside funerals. Graham laid out our case clearly. Monica had emptied our joint account while I was unconscious in the hospital. We had documentation showing I was physically incapable of making transactions. Monica had been fully aware of my condition and still took the money. Angela Price did exactly what we expected. She brought up the refinance, claiming I had acted in secrecy, cutting Monica out of major financial decisions, and framed it as a betrayal that justified her actions. The judge wasn't impressed. He asked them to stick to the matter at hand, the timing of the withdrawal. When Graham submitted my medical records showing I was unconscious for nearly 48 hours, the exact window during which the account had been drained, the courtroom fell silent. In the end, the judge ordered all funds frozen until the divorce was settled. Neither of us could access the money. He also granted me temporary use of the marital home, citing both my health and the evidence of financial exploitation while I was incapacitated. I heard Monica exhale sharply, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. But she said nothing. Angela gently pulled her toward the hallway as the session ended. A few days after the court granted me possession of the house, I returned. Monica had moved out as required. On paper, the house was mine, legally, physically, completely. But as I stepped through the familiar doorway, I didn't feel like I was home. The place felt distant, like a shell. The key still worked. The lock was the same, but nothing inside felt familiar. A faint trace of men's cologne lingered in the air. Subtle but unmistakable. Not mine. I walked through the living room. The recycling bin still held a couple of empty wine bottles. In the dishwasher, 2 glasses sat with dried red stains clinging to the bottom. No voices, no accusations, but everything around me whispered the same truth. Monica had been gone far longer than her body ever was. I paused in the hallway. The wedding photo that used to sit on the old wooden table by the corner, it was gone. Monica had taken it. But maybe. She had taken that version of us long before I noticed. After that day in court, things moved faster than I expected. Ron, the man who had pretended to be my friend, quietly sold his house. Sophie, using her internal contacts at the credit union where she was interning, helped flag unusual activity in nearby accounts. That's how we found Ron's withdrawals. His accounts had been nearly emptied, most of it taken out in cash. All within 3 days of the initial hearing. He vanished without a trace, and more importantly left Monica to face the fallout alone. 6 weeks later, we finalized the divorce. Monica didn't fight much. Maybe she was exhausted. Maybe she finally realized there was nothing left to salvage. The judge divided the assets cleanly. I kept the house, my truck, and nearly 80% of what remained, including funds recovered from the hidden account. Monica walked away with her car, and 20%, most of which went to paying Angela Price's fees. I haven't seen Monica since. Didn't need to. The lawyers handled everything else. Last I heard, she moved to another state far enough that we'd never cross paths by accident. A few months later, I sold the house. Not because I had to, but because I couldn't sleep under the same roof where silence had slowly killed a marriage. I bought a smaller place near Brandon's neighborhood. Not much, but just enough for me and the peace I'd forgotten I needed. 3 months after the final hearing, I started a new chapter. I sold the old house. Not because I needed the money, but because I couldn't stay in a place that made me feel small, even though I had paid for it year after year. Every room reminded me of the long silence. Of the nights Monica would text a few words and turn her back to me in bed. That house was no longer mine in any way that mattered. I bought something smaller not far from Brandon's place. Just enough space for one man living simply. I repainted the walls, replaced every curtain, threw away anything that smelled like the past. For the first time in years, I lived in a space that felt entirely my own. I don't drive long haul anymore. My heart can't handle it, doctor's orders. Now I work dispatch. It's a quiet job. Regular hours. No highway. No midnight truck stops. I come home at the same time every day, cook dinner, listen to soft jazz, and sometimes just sit in silence while the wind moves through the windows. That's enough now. I used some of the settlement money and what I had left to help Sophie, Brandon's niece, finish law school. She saw what I couldn't long before I was ready to face it. Quiet kid, but sharp. She's going to make one hell of a lawyer, better than the ones Monica hired to tear me down. I don't hate Monica anymore. That emotion passed like a storm that came and went, leaving the air oddly still. The pain lingers like a faint crack in a mirror, but I've learned how to look at it without turning away. I don't think Monica was all bad. I think she was weak. Weak enough to avoid hard conversations. Weak enough to stay while planning to leave. And weak enough to believe betrayal was her only way out. For a long time, I thought betrayal was the worst thing someone could do. But now I know what truly hurts isn't being betrayed. It's realizing you trusted something that was never real in the first place. Last week, I was cleaning out an old cabinet and found our wedding album. Dusty. I flipped through a few pages. Didn't feel angry. Didn't feel sad. I closed it gently, put it in a box, and tucked it away at the bottom shelf. Not because I want to forget, but because now I understand it was never the ending. Just one chapter,